India is preparing to go to the moon once again with Chandrayaan 3. Chandrayaan 1 was an ambitious mission. Chandrayaan 2 was even more ambitious, and Chandrayaan 3 promises to be a great mission. I have with me Mr. S Somanath, Chairman of the Indian Space Research Organization, and the person who's spearheading this whole operation on Chandrayaan. So let's talk all about the past, present, and the future of Chandrayaan and lunar exploration. Mr. Somanath, how is the preparation for Chandrayaan 3? Can we see a launch soon?
Of course, Chandrayaan 3 spacecraft, including the lander, the rover, and the propulsion module, is fully integrated and is already encapsulated and is part of the vehicle building now. So we are hoping to have the launch soon.
Now, you're using the launch vehicle Mark 3, which was the same kind of vehicle which was used in Chandrayaan 2?
Yeah, of course, the launch vehicle Mark 3 is the same rocket. But that the rocket has further been improved and the many elements have been upgraded based on the recent launches of LVM-3 that happened post Chandrayaan 2 mission. So generally for you, it is the same rocket. But for us, we understand that it has higher levels of engineering in build-up as well as in reliability.
Now, what is the reason why we are doing Chandrayaan 3?
The purpose and the objective of Chandrayaan 3 stands almost similar to what is Chandrayaan 2. Chandrayaan 2 had set of host of instruments on board the orbiter, the lander and the rover. And the orbiter part is functioning still very well, and this has certain amount of scientific objective, primarily from the remote sensing perspective of the moon, which has been very well done. Even now it is functioning, but with respect to in situ observations which are supposed to be done by the lander and the rover, we couldn't accomplish because the lander and rover couldn't soft land on the moon. So those instruments were not utilized for studying the tropospherical or the geological or rather the seismological atmospheric studies of the moon could not be done based on in situ measurements. So we hope that we will accomplish that part of the mission, which is the soft landing mission, as well as that part of the scientific objective can be met by Chandrayaan 3.
So essentially the objective is to have a soft landing and roving on the lunar surface?
Of course, soft landing and roving on the lunar surface is a prerequisite for doing any of those experiments. Without that, you are not going to achieve it. So it's not the objective. I must say any exploratory mission of this nature is scientific in nature. But it also contains that those steps that we need to have, like capturing the moon orbit, is a big step in the Chandrayaan 1. Sending a lander craft on a propulsive assisted landing process is next step in Chandrayaan 2. Now reaching landing, safely landing, getting the rover out and roving on the moon is technologically a next step. But all these technological steps are necessary for the scientific objective. Ultimately, we are looking at it. So my goal is to see the scientific outcome also comes out along with the technological goals that we are going to meet.
Now, what lessons did we learn from the failure of the Vikram lander in Chandrayaan 2 and what changes have you incorporated?
See, the main lacuna in the Chandrayaan 2 mission was that there were off-nominal conditions that were initiated in the system. Everything was not nominal, and the craft was not able to handle the off-nominal condition for a safe landing. So the essential lesson is in any space mission, the focus should be on conditions of off-nominality. So how we address them and how we mitigate the possibilities of a failure in such an event. This is specifically the learning. We do it regularly for rockets for many conditions. If the propulsion is underperforming, certain sensors are not coming, certain conditions are initial conditions we assume are not happening, how much dispersion it can handle. This is the whole thought process went into Chandrayaan 3 making, and we have added new instruments to handle failures, new algorithms to handle off-nominal situations, new approaches to soft land in case of not availability of any such measurements and total uncertainty. So in all such conditions, we should target the final objective of reaching the soft landing, of course with certain dispersions which are tolerable in terms of the range, distance, location, etc. There could be some dispersions. So we will first target a nominal conditions. If we don't do it, we target other scenarios. So we have a nominal landing site. We have also an off-nominal landing site. We also have the benefit of Chandrayaan 2. Like the OHRC camera of Chandrayaan 2 gave excellent images of high resolution to us. And these images become very useful for determining the landing site, which was not the case before Chandrayaan 2. Now these images are with us and these are part of the Chandrayaan 3 mission, and it can identify and land at a very specific location. We also strengthened the lander in various ways, like increasing the propellant loading in the lander to handle more mission dispersions, added more of solar power generation capability on increasing the area as well as adding cells in other phases so as to have more tolerance to non-orientation or wrong orientation of landing. Like sun is in only from one direction. We also looked at how the lesser number of engines can handle this function because mass is increasing for the lander and more engines have to function during landing time than the earlier one. We added new sensors like the laser Doppler velocimeter to handle or to measure velocity of the craft in relation to the surface of the moon and have redundancies of measurements in addition to the already existing optical measurements on board. Like that, we looked at various strengthening mechanisms to land.
So have the legs of the lander also been strengthened?
Legs of the lander, though its configuration remains the same, structurally it is strengthened so as to handle almost 1 meter per second additional velocity also, so that even if it has a hard landing, possibility of survival could be higher.
Now, in the lander, there is also software, and the whole navigation and trajectory determination is done through software. Have you made changes in the software, having learnt lessons from Chandrayaan 2?
Of course, the software contains various elements. The one of the important element is called guidance software, which finds out the optimum path of traveling one from location to another. And this algorithm of the guidance is so critical for soft landing. And there are constraints which are put in for various events during the landing, like the ability to the camera to look at the ground. You should have certain orientation, certain rates limitation. So we looked at all such things and made certain changes in the software to handle more possibilities of errors in the initial conditions. So one of the conditions in the earlier software was the initial condition dispersions were less to be handled. Now we have widened so that even if it enters the guidance scheme at different initial conditions which will allow wider dispersions, still the software will be able to lead it to a safer landing. Similarly, some of the constraints that came out of the whole mission of Chandrayaan 2 were all relaxed to handle wider dispersions. So definitely the basic structure of the software remains the same. We have added certain features to handle essentially the larger dispersion of initial conditions, larger tolerance to failure of devices and systems, and contingency measures to handle landing under adverse situations as well. So to that extent, software has been modified.
So essentially, it is more robust. Is that a fair assessment?
That's how we call it. The robustness comes, essentially in any robust system is tolerant to parameter perturbations. This is what is called robustness. So essentially we achieved that. The tolerance to parameter perturbations of propulsion, mass, center of gravity, controlled scenario, failures of various systems, degradation of sensors. So all these have been looked at and still it has to land safely. So we look at, in terms of statistical sense, we call it standard deviation dispersions. We call it 3 sigma. Okay, 3 times the standard deviation it disperses, also it should land it safely, and we have seen that even beyond that it will land safely.
Now, this is in the lander.
Yeah.
Now, the lander is heavier than last time?
Of course, lander is heavier by around 200 plus kilogram. Primarily because of the strengthening of the legs, the additional solar panel area, the increased propellant loading, additional sensors, etc. So it has become heavier. And because of the heavierness, we have, and of course there is a reduction of mass of the propulsion module compared to last time orbiter. So it is a transfer of mass from orbiter to lander this time.
Now, in the lander, have you added stuff which will make sure that the learnings from Chandrayaan 2 are incorporated even as it is going in for its landing?
Yeah, essentially
Images or something?
Of course, what we do is that Chandrayaan 2 gave a very high resolution images from the OHRC, the orbital high resolution imager, and this data is now available with us. The entire map of Chandrayaan 2 is there with us. Chandrayaan moon is there with us from the Chandrayaan 2. So we looked at the landing site, and we have extended the landing site boundary now this time, so that the targeted boundary conditions, the dispersions can be well handled. And this image is already on board of it. So we have resolution almost 30 centimeter or better is all mapped, like craters and boulders are fully mapped. So when the Chandrayaan 3 takes an image of the landing site and compares to the onboard image, we have guarantees of matching very well. Whereas last time that these images were supposed to be captured in the previous orbit and sent back to Earth and then reconfirmed. So all this exercise we don't have to do this time because of the Chandrayaan 2 mission.
And are we targeting this similar landing site like Chandrayaan?
Yeah, exactly similar landing site at the southern side of the moon.
And why are we choosing the southern side of the moon, the southern pole? Is it because the likelihood of water which Chandrayaan 1 found and made lunar history?
That is what is postulated. If you are able to go to the less illuminated zone, the likelihood of water being present in more observable ranges of the molecular level could be found out. This is a hypothesis, but we cannot go really to an unilluminated zone. We have to go to an illuminated zone, otherwise there is no guarantee our craft will survive sufficiently longer, unless you have onboard power generation capability like nuclear power or something. Sometimes we
like they have on the Mars rover by NASA.
Sometimes we have to, maybe at a later point in time we may go to the pole, but today we cannot go up to the pole. We have to go to a point where there is sufficient illumination to last at least one lunar day for both the lander and rover.
Now, on the rover, are there any changes?
Rover essentially is the same. There are no major changes, and the payloads and the systems remains the same.
So Pragyan remains the same?
Pragyan remains the same.
Now, on Pragyan, would there be any way that India would be leaving an imprint on the soil of the moon once the rover comes out?
Of course, the wheel tracks and marks on the surface of the moon should say about it. So it should leave some imprint.
And will we have the lander taking pictures of the rover coming out, and the rover, once it goes down, taking pictures of the Vikram lander? So in a way, the first selfie is arriving from the moon for India?
Of course, when the rover comes out, there is a sequence of processes which is required. The door opens, the rail track for the rover to come out, Pragyan to come out will be opened, and all this will be imaged by a camera on board the lander. That will cover the rover as well as the terrain of the moon. So we will see the rover coming out with the background of the moon and the dark sky. So you should be able to see that. And after that, when the rover comes out and it moves around the rover comes out and moves around the lander with the power generation, because it has to face always the moon, sunlight. So it will actually make a round around the lander. So that time there are other cameras on the lander which will take pictures of this. So you will be able to see the rover from the camera pictures of the lander, and the camera on the rover also will take the picture of the lander.
And we have the Indian flag both on the lander and the rover, is that correct?
Of course, there is an imprint of our Indian flag on both Pragyan and Vikram.
Now, we are still talking about the landing and the roving part. We'll come to the science in a bit. How confident are you about Chandrayaan 3? Because Chandrayaan 2 was a big dampener for India and the morale of ISRO and everybody, till Prime Minister Modi came around that morning and uplifted the morale of the country. How confident are you with the testing which has been done?
See, in any space mission, as you know, it's an unforgiving domain where if you have not done the work properly, if you have not thought about what can go wrong and taken corrective actions, it will all come out in the real mission if luck is not in your own side. So we have seen it in many missions of the failures which we have seen, the failure of the PSLV, the failure of the GSLV, even the SSLV failure in the recent times. But we cannot be discouraged by any of those events that will happen in a space mission. We have to find the cause and take the corrective action and make the next step. This is what we are destined to do. So in Chandrayaan 3, I am doing exactly the same. Whatever learning that came from Chandrayaan 2, we have incorporated in Chandrayaan 3 the fullest of our confidence. It's not only that in case that we find that whether we have not sufficiently understood. So for that case, we have brought in experts from various other sources, like including people from JPL, people from Indian Academy and institutions. All were part of the review process of this Chandrayaan 3 for the changes as well as the improvements. So their suggestions have been incorporated. Additional test and simulations of what I mentioned about non-nominal condition existence of the mission and how to handle it such scenarios. We also created new simulation test beds as well as various test scenarios, much more than what we could do in Chandrayaan 2, because we gave more time to this time to complete all those tests to our satisfaction. And the test gives such an information that we have to modify certain additional parameters and capabilities. So all this skill and knowledge has gone into it. Today we have great confidence on the system that is incorporated in it. But of course, in any mission, as you know, that there could be failures beyond our control. There are scenarios which you could never ever imagine with our understanding, because every mission is a statistical event. It has so many possibilities turning out to a physical reality in which something can go wrong, and these things going wrong will be corrected by the system only if you have thought about it and incorporated in it. This is the crux of the problem.
So the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns and the unknown unknowns have all been taken care of as to the best capability of scientists and engineers at ISRO?
Of course, what we are taken care of is only known unknowns. See, nobody can take care of unknown unknowns. So what you do is we take on collective wisdom. The whole of our space mission is based on collective wisdom. Not one person can identify anything. So we bring in domain specialists in propulsion, control, guidance, electronics, sensors, and various flight mechanics, mathematics. And they sit together and review in hundreds of committees and reviews. And everywhere there will be some suggestions and improvements come. Make sure this democratically addressed. We go through a process. And we, in higher management, will bring out the gist of all these reviews and outcome. Wherever there are corrections recommended, whether there is any alarms raised, we review it on a continuous basis. In my level, it is my job to watch and follow this process is being followed inside. And I am very sure once you follow this process in the organization with the expertise at various levels addressing issues, I'm sure we will make a very good work outcome. It cannot be decided by in one location or one person. That has been removed. It is not there in ISRO. It is a group work where hundreds of people of various skills and capabilities come together to create one unique outcome. And this has been working very well, and I'm very sure it will work this time as well.
Now, the orbiter which will be used would be the Chandrayaan 2 orbiter. Is it in good health?
It is still in very good health, and we will be using Chandrayaan 2 orbiter for our ascent communication relay station for Chandrayaan 3.
And what about the whole science which will be done? Now, is there any instrument on the propulsion module? Because this time you're not calling it an orbiter but a propulsion module?
Yeah, theoretically the propulsion module should not have any instrument, but we found that it is possible. It has certain life. It has a short life, likelihood of having a short life. So we thought that what we can do with it. And one of the payload that we added is to look at Earth from Moon and then look at the habitable planet-like features of Earth be captured using a spectrographic instrument and use this information as a study for future exoplanet studies. So there is one payload for that.
So essentially looking for signatures of what life on Earth is and then using those signatures to look for life on other planets which we call Earth-like planets in future?
Yes, exactly the same. So we know today exosolar planets are at great interest in all over the astronomers, and many of them have been discovered, including the near stars. So if you are able to identify the features, because today we do a certain amount of remote sensing of the atmosphere of those planets to understand the relative distance between the planet and the sun, we find out the star's capability, what will be the likelihood of the temperature there. We look at the light coming through the atmosphere of that planet and then look at spectroscopically identify the structure of that atmosphere, what type of constitutions are there, whether water is present, whether oxygen is present. So this is an extent of study today. But if you are able to do similar observation for Earth and then use some correlation between this to the exosolar planets, possibly we can say, okay, such and such planets have high likelihood of having life of similar to Earth. Of course, life could be in many other forms. They don't have to be like Earth.
May not be carbon.
May not be carbon and oxygen based.
Now, what about the science on the lander, and what about the science instruments on the rover?
Okay, there are the instruments on both lander and rover are one and the same as what we flew last time. We will be using the mineral study or the constituent element study of the surface of the moon is one objective. We want to look at the low height atmospheric characteristics, electrostatic characteristics of the moon. We would like to pierce one sensor into the surface of the moon, so to the depth of almost 10 centimeter, and measure the thermophysical characteristics of the moon regolith. So these are the type of observation capability that we have built into both the lander and rover.
Are we looking for any signs of life on the moon with Vikram and Pragyan?
With all the available knowledge, we know that there is no possibility of life on the moon. So there is no instrument to look specifically on the life on the moon. But we are looking at the thermophysical, the electron, the static, electric charge characteristic of the moon. We are also looking at the seismological studies. We are putting an instrument to look at the seismic signatures due to various activities.
What we call earthquakes or lunar quakes.
We don't call it earthquake. Anything very small impact. So, for example, asteroid coming and hitting moon, it will generate a wave, and we can sense it using a very highly sensitive instrument. And various movements of this can be sensed. So, it will give you some understanding of the inside structure of the moon. So, this is also another scientific objective.
So, how many people would have worked on Chandrayaan 3, and what is the rough cost?
See, Chandrayaan 3, there are people working on the rocket, people working on the satellite, and also the entire ground infrastructure, people who are contributing to it. So it could be some thousands plus.
That's a large number of people whose grace and brain matter has been used.
Directly and indirectly contributing, yes.
And roughly, have you kept to cost and the budget which was allocated, and what is the amount of money for the rocket and the orbiter together?
See, I won't be able to give you the exact number at this time. We only say that we are using LVM-3 vehicle with its cost at the current level, and lander and Chandrayaan 3 costs are within the allocated budget.
And we are targeting the South Pole because the possibility of having human habitation outside Earth is much higher on the South Pole of the moon. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know that aspect very well, which is the best place for human beings to go. You are talking from the point of view of the availability of water. Possibly that may be one aspect which has to be looked at. For people to stay today, one of the important requirement is the temperature excursions, as well as availability of solar power for power generation. From that point of view, an equatorial location could be more ideal for human beings to settle, if at all, if there is a human habitat has to be built, because power is reasonably continuous and available, which is the key element to survival. Of course, water creation becomes an issue, from where to extract, whether it is subterranean water to be evaluated or to be brought from pole. This has to be discussed. So I can't fully go into that to say for a human settlement, which is the location I need to study.
You also have a mission to the sun and possibly a mission to Venus, which you are planning. And are there any other follow-up missions to Mars and Moon which are planned?
No, currently, there is an Aditya L1, which is a mission to study sun. For Lagrangian point L1, we are launching our Aditya L1, which is getting ready. All instruments are delivered and currently under testing and integration with the satellite for a launch possibly by August. So that is going on. Then mission to Venus is in the conceptualization. We have done the scientific part of it, looked at the instrument development and a lot of consultation and type of instruments that can be considered for a Venus mission is already brought out, and possibly a probe going into the Venusian atmosphere to study the atmospheric characteristics is also part of it. But it has to get approval for financial approval for proceeding with it. We are also looking at various other missions, like a mission to study exosolar planets. So there is a project which is working on what type of sensors are to be made for studying exosolar planets, to look at spectroscopic characteristic of the atmosphere of the planets. So this is another mission. We are also looking at an aeronomy mission, a twin satellite aeronomy mission called Disha. This is also proposed, and currently scientific work and consultation have happened, and all the scientific pool across the country have been brought under this mission, and we are reviewing it to see how this can be taken forward. Mars Orbiter Mission 2 is also on table for discussion on identifying what exactly the scientific objective that we want to accomplish through another Mars mission. Unless the scientific mission objectives are not very clear and worth pursuing, we may not take it. So these are the scientific missions currently under discussion.
Exciting time for ISRO?
See, it is always exciting. Last many years when I was in ISRO, I know that it has been all the time exciting, whatever you do, whether you are building or developing rockets, doing new missions, encouraging people to do something unique at very, very low cost with minimal resources. It's always very challenging and exciting to do things which actually shows up some results.
So lessons learned from Chandrayaan 2 will make possibility of success in Chandrayaan 3 higher?
Definitely, it is always like that. The one step you fall, the next step you should not. So we can never get a failure mode of that nature in this mission. That of course that will be guaranteed. And any other similar failure modes of what happened in Chandrayaan 2 are also not guaranteed. But there could be something different. So we will not say that. We always go with a full success mode of assessment, looking at what our possibilities and what our actions that we can take are taken within the understanding that we have today. Of course, there is a shortage of understanding. There is a big problem. We can't work on it. So we think that the entire understanding required for making that mission is already there in place. All effort required to complete that understanding and prove it on ground on test beds are also being done. So we go with full confidence at this moment.
Thanks a lot for speaking to me.
Thank you.
Good luck for Chandrayaan 3 and beyond. I'm sure ISRO will bring glory for India. So that was Mr. S Somanath, Chairman of the Indian Space Research Organization, giving us details on the past, the present and the future of lunar exploration by India. India has tremendous capabilities of understanding and studying the moon. This is Pallav Bagla